She had no business being on Everest, no real high-altitude experience. Oxygen running out, a guide telling her to turn back. She ignored all of it and kept climbing toward the summit. She was 33 years old, born in Kathmandu, raised partly in Mumbai, living in Toronto when she decided that the mountain she had seen from a helicopter at age 9 was the one she was going to build her life's biggest goal around. She had mortgaged her house to pay for the expedition. She had very limited high-altitude mountaineering experience. On the summit, she took photographs. Then she began the descent. She did not make it down. 3 weeks earlier, on the same mountain, a 59-year-old school teacher named Suzanne Leopoldina Jesus had collapsed on the lower slopes before reaching Camp 1. She was evacuated by helicopter and died the following morning. She had never seen the death zone. She had never come close to the technical section of the route. Everest had taken her anyway, at an altitude most trekkers reach without supplemental oxygen or specialist equipment. 2 women, same mountain, same season, same outcome. Completely different stories of how the mountain broke them. This is both of those stories. Shreya Shah Chlorfine, the dream that cost everything. Shreya was born in Kathmandu in 1979. The goal began with a single moment. A helicopter ride at age 9, her father beside her, the summit of Everest visible through the window. Someone told her how difficult it was to reach the top on foot. That sentence lodged in her and never left. She carried it through a move to Mumbai, then to Toronto, through a career in fashion retail and the building of a small business and a marriage and a life that looked, from the outside, like it had nothing to do with mountains. But the goal was always there, getting louder. When she finally committed to Everest in 2012, she and her husband took out a second mortgage on their home, approximately $100,000, to fund the attempt. That financial commitment was the first thing that made her attempt dangerous, and it had nothing to do with altitude. A climber who has spent $100,000 and mortgaged their house does not turn around easily. The summit becomes the only acceptable outcome. Warning signs that should trigger retreat get reframed as obstacles to push through. Experienced guides call it summit fever. It is not a weakness of character. It is a predictable psychological response to extreme financial and emotional commitment, and it kills people on Everest with regularity. Her preparation was not equal to the mountain. She trained in Toronto, weighted backpack walks through city hills, some cardio, and limited rock climbing. At some point during the expedition's lower stages, she had to be shown how to attach crampons, the metal spikes that clip to boots for movement on ice, equipment that high-altitude climbers typically master years before attempting an 8,000-meter peak. The guiding company she had selected, chosen partly for cost, had no prior record of bringing clients to Everest's summit. Her summit push took far longer than expected, with delays and exhaustion setting in early against a standard of approximately 13 hours for a well-prepared climber. Before she reached the top, a guide told her directly to turn back. Her oxygen was critically low. She had been in the death zone far longer than her supplies were calculated to sustain, and her body was visibly deteriorating. She refused. She said she was going to the top. She reached it. She stood on the summit of Everest and took her photographs. Then she turned around. Her body failed on the descent. Her speech slurred. Her steps slowed to a shuffle, then stopped. Sherpas pulled and dragged her forward, step by step, but at 8,000 meters, a person who cannot move independently cannot be carried to safety. Her last words, spoken to the guides who were still trying to move her, were to save me. She died that night on the mountain. She had been climbing for 27 hours. Her husband received 2 phone calls from Nepal within hours of each other. The first told him she had submitted. The second told him she was gone. Suzanne Leopoldina Jesus, the record the body refused to allow. Suzanne Leopoldina Jesus was 59 years old, a schoolteacher who had spent her career in a classroom in India, and she arrived at Everest Base Camp in May 2012 with a goal as precisely defined as any in that season's expedition roster: to become the first Asian woman with a pacemaker to summit Everest. She had lived with the device for years. It had not stopped her from doing anything else she had committed to. She saw no reason it should stop her from this. she had not accounted for what altitude does to a body that a pacemaker cannot fix. The acclimatization problems began on the first walking day. Standard acclimatization rotations from base camp cover modest elevation gains, 250 to 400 meters, and are designed to take 2 to 3 hours. Suzanne was taking 5 hours, then 6, then, on one rotation, 12. She was covering ground that other expedition members had walked in an afternoon and arriving at the turnaround point exhausted, barely able to stand. Her pace did not improve with rest. Her body was communicating clearly and repeatedly that it was not adapting. A pacemaker regulates cardiac rhythm. What it cannot regulate is oxygen. At base camp elevation of 5,300 meters, the air holds approximately 50% of the oxygen available at sea level. A heart that beats perfectly still cannot oxygenate blood that contains insufficient oxygen to sustain the body's demands. Her heart was doing everything it was capable of doing. The altitude was winning the argument anyway. Then a severe throat infection set in. Eating became painful, then nearly impossible. Without food at altitude, the body consumes muscle tissue for fuel. The same muscles needed to climb, to stay warm, to keep moving. She was losing physical capacity faster than the altitude alone would have caused because two separate systems were failing simultaneously. Guides on the mountain saw it. Nepalese government officials monitoring the expedition saw it. Both told her to stop. She refused. She had paid for the attempt. She wanted the record. She had committed to this as publicly and completely as Shreya had, and the psychological mechanics were identical. The goal had become larger than the warning signs, and no external voice could reach her through that. When her condition deteriorated beyond what the expedition could manage, she was forcibly evacuated by helicopter from below Camp 1 before the technical climbing had begun, before the route had become genuinely dangerous by Everest standards. She was taken to a hospital in Lukla, the nearest settlement with medical facilities. She had not seen the icefall. She had not entered the western CWM. She died the following morning. The altitude, the infection, the nutritional collapse, and the weeks of physical deterioration had produced damage the hospital could not reverse. She was 59 years old. She had come to Nepal to make history. The mountain did not negotiate with that intention. What the 2012 season recorded. 11 people died on Everest in 2012. It was one of the deadliest seasons in the mountain's modern commercial era. Shreya Shah and Suzanne Leopoldina Jesus were two of them. Separated by 3 weeks and by every surface detail of who they were, united by the same fundamental gap between what they brought to the mountain and what the mountain required. Shreya's body remained on Everest for several days after her death, visible to climbers passing the same point on their own summit pushes. Recovery at that altitude is rarely possible, and her family accepted that she would remain on the mountain. In Kathmandu, where she was born, the family received news of a death on the mountain that had been visible from the city her entire life. Suzanne's family in India received news of a death that had happened before the real climb had begun. At an altitude, the mountain does not even consider its dangerous section. The record she had come to set was not set. The classroom she had taught in for years was where the news arrived. Nepal issued more than 340 climbing permits in 2012. The government's response to the season's death toll was to note that Everest was dangerous and that climbers accepted that risk when they applied. No new minimum experience requirements were introduced. The permit fee for the following season was unchanged. In 1996, the climber and author John Krakauer wrote after surviving one of Everest's deadliest seasons, "It is not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves." Shreya Shah and Suzanne Leopoldina Jesus conquered themselves completely. Neither doubt nor hesitation stopped either of them. The mountain was indifferent to that.